because this is one that is typically used on commercial as well. And it's called, thank you, it is called the Deferred Maintenance Credit. This is how this works. When you go through your inspection, you're going to find items that need to be replaced or repaired. Replaced or repaired on the property. And usually, I would say a good rule of thumb would be for a Class B property, something that's not brand new, something that commands about mid-level rents, something that was probably built after 1980, 1985, somewhere in there, decent condition. I would say on average, it's about $2,000 a unit. That's been my experience, okay? Let's say that we narrow this down from our 90 unit and we're looking at a 12 unit building. It's Class B, we go through it, we find $2,000 on average of items that need to be repaired or replaced. So 2,000 times 12 is 24,000. Now remember, you're going in every room, the kitchens, the bathrooms, exterior, that's what's making up all the $2,000. So this $24,000 credit, let's say that we're buying this thing at $600,000. It's a 12 unit. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, we have got an 80-20 deal. 80 meaning bank financing, and 20 meaning down payment. So that means $480,000 comes from the bank, and we are required to put down $120,000 down payment. Okay? Everybody see that? Great. So we've got this $24,000. There's three ways typically that this is handled. Three ways. The first way that this is handled is that's never brought up to seller. A lot of times when they have an inspection on a property, they never bring these items up to the seller because they're afraid it's going to, quote unquote, ruin the deal. Okay? Ruin the deal. So in that scenario, they are still required to bring $120,000 to close. Scenario number two, and this is almost where you get that person that went to one or two seminars and they've read a couple books and all of this. They'll say, hey, Mr. Seller, I've identified through my due diligence that there's about $24,000 worth repaired or replaced here. I want you to deduct that from the sales price. Remember what we talked about earlier with seller psychology. Seller motivated by price, buyer motivated by terms. So the guy's going to say, hey, Mr. Seller, I've found out that $24,000 worth of items need to be repaired or replaced. I want you to deduct that from the sales price. How many people have used this technique before? It's okay to yeah, absolutely. Check this out. So in number two, deduct from sales price. Here's what happens. That $600,000 building turns into a $576,000 building. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, that's right. I lowered that price. Right on. Check this out, though. So at $576,000, you're still required to put 20% down. What's 20% of $576,000?
115, 200.
115, 200. So you've lowered your down payment from 120,000 to 115, and you feel really good about that 576 price. That's how the average investor does it. This is how I want you to do it from this point on. Are we clear with that? Okay? And if you meet people that do it one of these two ways, that's okay. Say, hey, good job. You're great on. Great job on that price, buddy. Good job. Here's how I want you to do it. In step number 3, we are going to go to the seller, and you're going to go almost the same transcript. You're going to say, Mr. Seller, I've identified through my due diligence that there are $24,000 worth of items that need to be repaired or replaced. Check out my words. Instead of taking that from the sales price, I would like you to issue me a deferred maintenance credit so I don't have to bring that money to closing. Instead of deducting it from the sales price. The reason I throw that out there is because I know that that seller is motivated by price. Instead of deducting that from the sales price, I want you to issue me a deferred maintenance credit so I don't have to bring that money to closing. Here's how that works out math-wise. So we're just going to call this, DMC, with respect to old school hip hop maybe. DMC. And what happens in the deferred maintenance credit is this. The price stays the same. You're still required to bring 20% to closing, which is $120,000. However, you subtract from that 120 this deferred maintenance credit, and now you have to bring $96,000 to closing. Just that one small thing makes so much of a difference. The question that you need to be asking, we'll talk more about this in Chicago, is how you cover those things that need to be replaced and repaired. But what I'm trying to get you to think about is this. Of the 3 choices that people do, the first choice is 120, the second choice is 115, the third choice is 96. If we had more time, and maybe you can do this on your own, but if we had more time, we would break down, what this means with regard to your return, because it's all about your return. Think about this formula. Cash flow divided by initial investment. Cash flow divided by initial investment. So the more you can whittle this initial investment down, your return should go up. Does that make sense? When you are looking at that numerator and denominator, as Mrs. Valik in 5th grade put me in that refrigerator box, she thought I wasn't paying attention. I was listening here and goofing with my neighbor over here. But that numerator and denominator, if you think about those 2 aspects, if you can drop your initial investment down and your cash flow stays the same, your return is going to go up. Does everybody see this? Okay? So this is what I work on when I'm working on a deal. I'm working on all these different credits. And there's more than what we talked about here. I just wanted to give you a flavor of that. This is probably one of the best ways that you can get creative with your purchases as to these credits. Now, let me explain the residential side of this and the commercial side of this and how that differs. Okay? You got a question? Sure.
Question, yes.
Yeah.
In most cases, you're
Right in the mic. We need you right in the mic.
In most cases, you always, it's not on.
Is that not on still? Yeah, blow on it. Let it go, Ken. Hold on, stand by. The word always, and I'm sure right? You never want to use the word
A
always.
lot of times.
A lot of times.
As is. So
I don't see that a lot of times, but that's okay. I do see it, but if it's an as-is property and they're selling it as is, and this is mostly single-family houses you're looking at?
yes.
Okay, I'm just about to explain the residential differences between the commercial differences. If it's selling as is, obviously that seller is saying, hey, we know there's issues with it. We filled out our seller disclosure form. You're taking the property as is. We're not going to be liable for any repairs or probably any credits with the deal. They're going to be less flexible. Sylvan is now sniffing the microphone. Way to go. Someone's awfully kinky. So, obviously you're dealing with a seller that's going to be inflexible then. So you're not going to be able to implement a lot of this stuff. Maybe that's not your target purchase. Residentially, you're going to have a lot less flexibility. Number one, if somebody's getting a loan through a GSE, government-sponsored entity, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or they're getting something through FHA, like a first-time home buyer program, you're going to have very little flexibility anyway. So it's going to be like 3.5% seller contribution as a credit. Commercially, though, it's much more open. You know, when you're buying something commercially, very few times, 5 units and over, are you seeing as is on there. Sometimes you see that, but not all the time. A lot more on the single-family house type stuff. Okay?
But there's no trick to get around it?
On the single-family house side, not really. Do you have a question? Yeah, come on up. Right on. Let me see. Now, since you're up there, I want to make sure. Okay. See? I want to make sure this is going on for you here. Right on.
Sure, you bet. What I was going to say is if it's as is and the as is price is 600,000, why don't you just say, how about 624 and give me 24,000 back as a credit?
Okay. So you could increase the, okay, there you go. Thank you. All right. So you can increase the purchase price. Now, I will say this as a caveat, and you would agree with this as well, right? That you want to make sure the bank knows if you're going higher, so there's no kind of issue with any kind of lending or bank fraud that way. But yeah, that is a technique you could use, absolutely. Increase the price on that and take the credit. Okay? Any questions with that? Any other questions? Yeah, come on up now before we switch gears here.
That $24,000, do you take it off the price, or do you ask the seller to finance it? Does it change?
No, you missed the whole point there. You don't take, didn't you see the one, were you outside?
I was listening.
I think.
You all see why this question is a little silly right now, right? I'm sorry, I had to put you on the spot.
I can see that.
Danielle. Okay, so Danielle, basically, in number 2, we took it off the price. And you see that our down payment is $115,200. In number 3, we took it as a credit, left the price alone, and it lowers our down payment to $96,000. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still not getting where that 24,000 is going.
It's okay. Danielle, hold on one second. Good question. Do you remember this? Do you remember this, Danielle?
Yes.
If we've got a $24,000 credit here, it's a debit on the selling closing statement. So the $24,000 is going to as a debit, and it's being removed from his proceeds or her proceeds. Okay? We good now? That is a good question. Dallas.
Okay, I understand about the increase in the sales price, but on the lender side, when we're using OPM, wouldn't it be better to come to them with the opportunity of bringing in less as opposed to bringing in more?
Bringing in less, what do you mean?
Capital.
Well, you're going to take, what he's saying is increase the purchase price. You're going to take the credit, it's going to bring it back down to 600. You're not bringing in any more money.
It's the same.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Everybody got this? You guys like this stuff? Yeah. When you're especially it gets a lot more fun, I think, on the commercial side, 5 and over, because you have a chance to implement all this stuff. You have very little flexibility, for the most part, on the residential side. So that's kind of the commercial fun part here. Susan,
My question is about the 7 days. Why 7 days instead of 15 days? The 7 days you said closing day.
Oh.
You choose.
okay, good question. So you're talking about the rent credit. When we were talking about the rent credit. Okay, okay. So Susan's question is why the 7 days instead of the 15? Well, the later you get in the month, the smaller the credit you're going to have. You see that, right? Because you as the buyer are going to have less days in that month credited to you. Does that make sense? If you close on the 21st, you're going to have 9 days. If you close on the 15th, you're going to have 15 days. You see that, right? Okay. The reason I close on the 7th is typically in those contracts, you've got to have all the rents collected, or it's based on what rents have been collected, unless you have that statement that I put in there. Buyer has the right to receive a full month's rent credit for all occupied units, regardless of the day of closing. You see that, Susan?
Then 7 day will be better instead of 7.
Actually, no. If you've got this statement in here, you want to close on the 29th day or 30th day, okay? If you've got this one statement in there. But you see that, right? Okay. I answered your question?
No, now my question is 7 day will be better than the second day will be better than 7th day.
Second day, in theory, would be better than the 7th day, except that all rents have not been collected on the 2nd day. They've probably more likely been collected by the 7th. However, if you're using, hold on guys, hold on guys, I need you quiet so everybody can hear.
Sorry. I'm slow today.
Gary, can you imagine me yelling at people for talking? I used to do this. Don't make me break out my refrigerator box. You know what I'm saying? If you have this statement in here, you'd like to close on the 29th or the 30th. You're going to get a full month's credit of $48,600. And the very next day, rents are going to start coming in for the next month. And you've probably got 30 days at least, or 45, until you have to make that mortgage payment. You see? You see that? That's really hot. So,
So the other question I had is actually, it's more a statement actually. Option 3, from a taxation perspective, long term, since the price is already higher when you're going in, you already got that money out anyways. So when it comes time to sell, you're not going to get hit with as much capital gains.
you're talking basis in taxation, and capital gains is built on basis and proceeds. Expense of sale is included in there, and other things. This all has to be taken into consideration. Your expense of sale, what your basis is on the property. So when you're raising the price and doing some of these other things, you've got to consider that. That would be a good conversation to have with your accountant and or CPA, with no doubt about it, okay? Whew. You guys good? I felt like we covered a lot there. Was that good for you guys? Okay.